Hey, it's Alice Seba, and welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Self-Made. On behalf of Yusuf Kulan, my co-host, and myself, I am so glad you're here. And this week, we're going to be talking to Colin Theriot. Now, if you don't know Colin, you're going to come to appreciate his wisdom and his ability to kind of just do what he wants. He is a former art student and web designer who became a copywriter, who also taught copywriting, and then kind of transformed into teaching people to build an audience and sell via influence. Basically, make yourself into a guru of sorts, or just be a kind of person that people like to follow and learn from. And also doing it again completely on your own terms. We talked about being an entrepreneur as a creative person, not forcing things, but really seeing and seizing your opportunities. He had some great books, suggestions for us. And also, if you tuned in last week to Debbie Drum's interview, she was a big fan of AI, and on kind of like the opposite, Colin has sort of a more cautionary tale for us, and some really good things to consider as well. And as a heads up, we're going to be talking to Ross Goldberg next week. We had a fantastic conversation with this internet marketing veteran whose serious health challenge spurred a personal and business transformation. And kind of no matter where you are in life, I think there will be a lot of things that, I know I can relate to a lot of what Ross said, and I think everybody can. So before we get into the interview with Colin, just wanted to remind you, if you are looking to join, get some free marketing advice and classes, we do have those for you at ekithubuniversity.com. There's also a growing community where we can chat about episodes, about anything related to your business and life, all that good stuff. And also, if you don't have the My Lifestyle Self-Made guidebook, we highly recommend it. It's going to help you kind of evaluate all the different things in your life and find the right balance and figure out what your business really should look like and what you want your life to look like, and work towards it. And during each episode, when we premiere live in the chat, we do share kind of a supplement to that guidebook. So you'll have more things to think about and consider based on the guests that we talk to. So without further ado, let's get back together with Yusuf and Colin Theriot. So we have the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Theriot with us today. And I've known Colin for many years now. And I actually before we kind of dig into stuff, I actually wanted to, you submitted a bio to us, and you also gave us a little extra information. And I thought it was a fabulous demonstration of who you are in your business. And so you told us this is a bio where normally people will get, like, I'm so great and this is what I do. Instead, I used to be a web designer. Then I became a copywriter. Then I started to teach copywriting. Then I started teaching how to make a teaching business. And now I teach how to make yourself into a guru in your field and sell via influence. So I thought that's so obviously we are like very casual. We like to share stories. So maybe that inspired the bio, but it also kind of shows how, casual you are about things. And even though you're also a copywriter, and normally that would be a space where copywriters would go, more promotional with that. You didn't.
Right. I thought, for the audience that you told me you had, I thought it would be useful to show the span of my career. Before I was a web designer, I also was an usher in a movie theater and a stock boy in a grocery store. Those didn't seem as relevant, so I truncated it. As you pointed out, I'm also a reverend, a doctor, and a knight, but those are just fake titles I bought off the internet.
So they're real titles, but maybe not exactly.
Right. So, for example, I'm a doctor in the way that you can become a doctor if you have $70 for a diploma. I technically am a doctor in I'm a doctor of divinity with a focus in, what is it, esoteric psychology, which
Wow.
seemed like the coolest sounding option in the pull down at the time, but I looked it up later. It apparently has something to do with astral projection, which I don't actually know anything about.
You mentioned that you were a programmer. I did some of that before as well. I worked a lot with CSS, PHP, and C++. And then I quit because I found that, with the applications, WordPress and all that stuff that developed, I felt like I'm wasting my time building applications rather than focusing on building businesses and marketing, which is the reason why I got into programming in the first place. What made you make that transition from being a programmer to whatever you're doing today?
Okay, so first I was in art school. I went to art school, which is the opposite of marketing. However, the way you get graded in art school is like you do a group critique and you show up with your painting that you did to fulfill the assignment, and then you get to explain to everyone what you did and what your plan was. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning the art of bullshitting, which is basically like, due to the artificial constraints of this parochial environment, I was not able to fulfill my true vision. But let me tell it to you now. And then by the end of art school, I think I can get away with this. They won't come and take my diploma or anything, but I was turning in paintings from like previous classes untouched and just giving a different story about why it fit the assignment.
Repurposing, smart.
Yeah. It made some people mad, but they never tattled on me, so kudos to them for not snitching. So while I was doing that, as a campus job, I just told the story yesterday, I was reminded of it. As a campus job, I did the classified section of the school newspaper, and a local company was trying to hire a web designer, and I didn't run the ad, and I replied to it. So I was the only person who applied for the job because I didn't show it to anybody else. But they were looking for like web design for client sites. They were kind of like an agency, I guess you would call it today. So that was my transition from art to graphic design. And then while I was on that job is when I learned, you called it programming. I don't know that I would call it that. It was like no logic, just straight HTML style sheets, but like I didn't get the computer to do anything but show you with the web page. So I did that for a while. That carried through my career until I was doing web design at a marketing company, and the copywriter got sick. And I volunteered to help out, and my boss at the time, Andy Jenkins, rest in peace, he said, do you like doing this? And I said, well, Andy, it's better than illegally wiring your rental house so we can work from it as a startup. And he said, great, so you're hired. You're the chief marketing copywriter now, so get good at it. And then that company had, I guess you would call it a business divorce, where like the two guys who co-owned it did not like each other anymore and split apart. And in that, I left also, and that's the start of my freelance copywriting career. And at that point, to circle all the way back to your question, when did you decide to like move past doing that stuff? I knew when I left there, I would give myself some time. I talked it over with my wife to see, like, the revelation I had is like, for these two guys, I'm writing drafts, at least drafts of all of their copy, and they're selling millions of dollars worth of stuff. The only thing they have that I don't have is people know who they are. I'm doing the writing, I'm putting the buy button on it. So let me set about manufacturing that for myself, and I'll give myself like 5 years or whatever. It's been 15 now. And that's what I set out to do, is like leverage copywriting as a way to turn myself into an influential seller where people buy based on my recommendation and not because I wrote a 20-page sales letter or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love this. It's a great illustration of how casual and it feels like you go with the flow, right? Like, did you know even that you were going to be any type of entrepreneur? I don't even know if you call yourself an entrepreneur, actually, because I think I heard you say something.
Yeah, I consider myself as self-employed,
Mm-hmm.
and I still I've waffled with it over the years, but I consider basically what I live is like the life of an artist. So I work on the things that I want to work on. I have patrons who pay me to create those things by request or recommendation. I mostly make a lot of things that are the things that I feel like I want to make. And they are in the vein of things I've been interested in my whole life. So like trickery and persuasion and psychology and even the artistic aspects of advertising are all things that I liked before I ever got into marketing. So I'm very fortunate that making that stuff at will is how I make my living.
So when you made that transition by accident or whatever you want to call it to going on your own, how was it in the beginning? Was it tough, easy, or did you have any like? Just walk us through your feeling.
I was super fortunate and privileged at the beginning of my freelancing career because I mentioned my boss Andy Jenkins, who, when he left that company we were at together, it was called Stompernet. He had to do his own thing as well, and I was already his copywriter. Like I was already writing things in his voice because he had been the voice of the publications in the previous company. So he hired me right away to do his next launch that he had to do because he didn't have a job anymore. Neither did I. So we worked together on that. I think it was, I can't remember if he did Video Boss or Kajabi first, but he helped launch the first version of Kajabi at the time, and I helped with writing both of those. But he not only hired me, but referred me out as like the open secret. Now this guy is available. He was the writer for Stompernet. And he, without asking me, told people how much I charged, which was way more than what I would have asked for myself. So that was the kind of guy he was. He's a controversial figure. People got opinions about him. I can't say a bad word because he was so generous to me for no real reason that he had to. So to that end, I was very privileged to get those referrals. And again, my game was, I'm not doing this to have a long copywriting career. I am doing this to very quickly build up a reputation for myself. So like name recognition. And to that end, I took on projects that I knew I could brag about and people would recognize in the space. And the way I met Alice was through speaking at marketing events. And that's how I got into speaking at marketing events, is because I wasn't just a random copywriter. I was the guy who wrote this launch and that launch, and other speakers were my clients. So through the luck of copywriters normally being shy and me being positioned on purpose to weasel my way onto stage, that kind of blew up the early part of my career. And really my freelancing career was from, I quit Stompernet like August of 2009. And I quote unquote retired from writing copy for clients to run the Cult of Copy full time in September 2012. So from 2009 to 2012 is the only time period where I was taking on clients.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So just to bring it back,
I love Andy, actually. May rest in peace. But I didn't work with him at all, but found him to be like a really, kind-hearted and funny, but also a little ridiculous person.
Yeah. What I'll say is that he was quick to decide like you weren't worth his time, and he could be mean to people like that. And once he made up his mind, that was it. But if he liked you, he was tremendous. So, I mean,
probably a good assessment.
I feel like most people are like that, but it's very, he was like that in business too, very decisive, and the decision's made and that's it, and we're moving on and doing something else now.
Did you say that he launched Kajabi?
He helped with it. I don't know what the capacity was, but it was basically like the first version of it. No one knew what it was. It didn't exist yet. And he had been a launch guy, and I presume that's why they got his help to market it. But basically, like, my capacity was he brought me on as a copywriter to work under him. But I can't say what his relationship was with that business at that time. I was just writing the words.
Right. Yeah, because it's evolved to become a really good platform, which is a
Yeah, I
platform
use it. My membership site's on their website, not even because I did the launch, but because somebody else told me it was good and I put it on there. And I'm a guy, if it works, I leave it alone.
Yeah.
And I've never had a single support ticket since like 2017 where somebody's like, I paid and I didn't get my login. It's not happened one time, which is all I care about. Like, if you bought it, does it, like, make it easy for me. And they have. So thumbs up in that regard.
Oh, 100%.
So what you're also saying a lot about is connections and stuff. And I think a lot of online business people sometimes fail to build those. And even if you're not completely intentional, some people are very like, oh, I got to network, I got to meet these people. And I think you still let it grow organically, but you also still understand the power of connections and leveraging them. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do have some thoughts on that. In fact, I had a consultation earlier today with an old friend who's been in the business a long time, Adil Marcy. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but we've known each other over a decade. But some copywriters may recognize Adil. He's been around a while. But he and I were talking about different ways of selling from a sort of guru position. And there's some people who put themselves on the pedestal, and they're like, you're looking up at me, right? And then there's some people who I think kind of what you were referring to, Alice, are like just kind of disconnected. They do their thing, they do their service, maybe they get referrals or word of mouth, but they're never like out there publishing their thoughts or talking about their work or being available to anyone other than if you hired them. And what Adil and I were talking about is this idea of sort of lateral communication, where you publish as though you're talking to your peers, your colleagues, maybe even competitors at what you do, and just basically reporting on your work that you do for people. And what that does to that audience is it puts you among them, but you're giving off signals that make you followable, because you're telling people what you're doing and how you're doing it and what the success is, even though you're like, hey, fellow copywriters, here's a copy trick. You know, not, hey, beginner copywriters, I've been doing this years, buy this from me. Instead, just chatting, talking shop. And what happens is over time, you develop a following that dictates that you are seen as a leader in your field because you have a bunch of people following you. So you must know what you're talking about. But the effect of building that perception is just posting a certain kind of thing frequently so that the audience picks up that perception of you as that figure. And then once you're influential and you have a following, bandwagon effect kicks in, and people are like, the size of the crowd becomes influential to whether you're worth listening to or not, which is one of the reasons I started a Facebook group early on. The Cult of Copy group was because Facebook shows you how many people are in the group. So Alice has seen me give a couple of talks from stage. I would always say this many people in this many months. So 1,000 people in the first month, 10,000 people in the first year, and so on. It was like a slide in the presentation. So instead of me saying, hey, I have a huge audience, no, I grew this group of my peers that has this many people in it. So same thing, demonstrating that I'm being followed, but not declaring myself a leader. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't even know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I think that I wish that people did realize the importance of connection, not even just the people who follow you, but just people who can promote you, you can work together and do things. And it's super important to stay connected with people instead of acting like you're on an island.
Exactly. And I didn't close that gap. Thank you for reminding me of that part of the question. That ability to do that content to your peers about doing relevant work in the space is how I made those connections with the people who were speaking on those stages. because it wasn't like, hey, hire me as a copywriter. I was like, hey, here's some issues in marketing my business that I'm talking to you about as a peer, instead of I'm a guy you can hire to do this service for you. So that practice of always speaking as though you're presenting to colleagues, as opposed to prospects or potential clients or leads or whatever, just we're on the same level, and I'm talking to you about business on, in an arena anyway, where I have a slight advantage, because every business needs to market itself, but I hope I know a little bit more about marketing than the average business owner, just a little bit at least. So we can talk about business on any level, but when we get to marketing, now I have something to talk to you about that can potentially impress you, which that's the secret, is being impressive to people.
It's a nice subtle way of demonstrating authority and demonstrating what you know, by not saying I'm the leader, but just show them what you've done rather than, telling them about what you have and for skills and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I've heard it said, like, some relationship guru in an entirely different context. I think he was talking about like personal relationship dynamics, but that idea that the person in charge of any relationship is the one who can walk away from it. So if you don't act like you don't need anything from anyone, but you're making offers, it just positions you differently than anyone else that wants something from that person, or wants to make sure that person takes something away. Just being there without trying to push or pull on most people is a way to just instantly stand out. Sad to say, but most people treat every relationship as transactional in some way. Especially in the business world. So if you enter into a conversation and there's not that push of, hey, here's what I want to talk about, and there's not that pull of, hey, give me this, they love it. And when you say, hey, you got any openings to talk on stage at your next event, they say, yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the emergence of artificial intelligence and how it has impacted copywriting.
Okay. So with the caveat that Alice said, I can be myself on this. I think artificial content generators are, like, for lack of a better term, and to point out I'm not a religious person despite being a reverend, that's just a thing I bought on the internet. I think they're as close to like a demonic influence as you can have, because they're not real, but they can convincingly pretend to be real. And there's something very upsetting to me about that, especially when they talk about, like, oh, we're going to train them to talk to lonely old people so they don't feel sad. Or we're going to train it on your relatives so when they die, you can keep talking to them. There's something, I'm a pretty laid back person, but when I say I find it kind of like disgusting or just, I don't know, like the worst dystopian idea of what you should do with technology, like very dehumanizing.
That's interesting too. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I like the online world. You obviously like it too, and you're able to connect with and meet people and do all that. So sometimes, and then a lot of people will say, oh no, it's not real world, and I'm convinced, yes, it's still the real world, but at the same time, they know, like, from studies that, like, the connections and the talking, or even how we're talking to each other right now, is not the same connection if we did it in person. And they're trying to that what you're highlighting is they're trying to amplify that and our reliance on the connections that are less meaningful.
Yes, and on top of that, the current crop of those generators was built on thievery. So they fed it all of this copyrighted stuff that belongs to living artists, living writers, without permission or compensation. And it's apparent in the court cases that they're having in Europe that they basically did the Bizbro thing of, we know it's wrong, but let's make it so big that they have to just give us special permission. because there's billions of dollars invested at this point. So basically they're asking special permission to violate copyright and just get away with stealing from these artists and basically making a commercial product from their work without permission or compensation. And just that it's got that very Silicon Valley biz bro attitude of, I'm going to take it anyway and see if they can stop me if I make it big enough. And once you've got like Microsoft giving you billions of dollars, I'm positive they've done exactly that. Like they're going to get away with that. The artists are not going to see compensation, and they're going to get probably special permission to do it forever. Like if you publish anything, they have special rights to feed it into this product of theirs.
Yeah.
So to me, long answer to your short question, I find these things highly unethical. I find them personally immoral. But as a professional who creates work and makes a living due to the benefits of copyright law, I don't see an ethical use of it for anyone who's a creative professional. I don't want to start a discussion about it or an argument, because I argue until I win, because I don't have a real job, and the way I win is you eventually quit. And I do actually have other stuff to do. So I try not to get into arguments about it, but it's a pretty solid position in my head. I can't think of a way around the theft part of it. Like if they had done it only on public domain works or only on things they had permission on, I might be able to have a different conversation about the viability of it as a useful tool. But that's a huge one for me, is the ethical issue. And then on top of that, they can't figure out how to make it not lie. So the main thing I would use it for, which is research, it can't be relied on to do that accurately. So the usefulness of it goes away for me. And people are like, it writes so fast. And I'm like, I write so fast. So
Yeah, it's
the,
true. Like I wonder, like how, like it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe ideas sometimes, yeah, like or things you can do, but like yeah, it's not. I don't know.
yeah, it's one of those things where like you can ask it like, hey, give me 10 ideas about this subject, and it could be useful for that. But I don't find it to be any more useful or quicker than just searching the web for the same thing. And on top of that, the thing eats energy and clean water like an insane amount. It's like powering 15 phones, charging 15 phones to make any one of these like AI generated images. And the amount of clean water it uses to cool all these supercomputers is also seems unethical or even immoral. I don't know. It's just
Yeah, the more we make our lives
it's
easier,
a dark
the
spot.
harder we make them.
Yeah, and then also I like it because I'm finally getting to the thing where there's a new thing that came out that young people are really into, and I hate automatically. So I'm like, I finally get to be like a curmudgeonly old man instead of like a young jerk like I was perceived in the early part of my career. So I get to make that transition. I'm the angry traditionalist now, as opposed to like the young guy being like, you're the one that's wrong, old man.
So moving out of like the world, the virtual world, let's talk about Colin in the real world. Like what makes you happy? What do you love doing? What does your business afforded you to be able to do with time or money?
Yeah, we have a lovely family life. I have 3 sons and a wife, obviously, dog and a cat. Got a nice McMansion in the suburbs. Money to play with, money to save. Yeah, it's just been comfortable. I haven't had to work hard in a long time, to the point where I don't remember how to do it sometimes. Having money to pay people to do this stuff I don't want to do myself, that's always nice, you know? Like one of the first things I did when I started my business was hire a guy to mow my lawn, because I've hated doing it since I was like 11, and I haven't done it since then. Like now, more of my life spent not mowing lawns than ever mowing the lawn again, just as an example. So that's been great, just the idea that like I make more than probably most artists would make, even though I get to live that life, as I mentioned. Um, yeah, like I'm home all day. I can go wherever I want to work from. Uh, you ask the kind of stuff that I like. I like collecting old things. So going to a used record store and flipping through the racks, or a used bookstore, like in the middle of the day when no one's there,
Yes.
are things that I like very much. Uh, Old comic books, old sci-fi paperbacks. Although I do hate that all the things I like to collect get invaded by like collector investors, and it makes it really expensive and not as fun. So even old video games now, which I was surprised, they do this thing called slabbing, and they do it to comic books too, where they basically, you send it to a company that appraises the condition it's in, and then they seal it permanently in a plastic case.
Oh.
So that the value is preserved, but then it's no longer an object you can enjoy. You can't open the book and read it. You can't take the video game out of the box and play it. And that, boy, that's another thing I hate. If you want to ask me, I can go on another rant about that, just like AI. But yeah, so like digging through old things, one of my favorite things about collecting old paperbacks is like when you find one that was autographed that whoever's selling it didn't know, or it's got someone's book plate in it, like collection of so-and-so, or it's got more than one stamp from different used bookstores telling you where it's been all over the country. I really like that. That's something I enjoy.
Do you currently have a piece or something that is that you found that it's valuable, or like by surprise?
I've never looked, because it's funny. I frequent a lot of used bookstores, and they usually have trade-in programs, and they're like, "Are you a member?" And I'm like, "I'm never bringing them back." So we don't have to get into all that. So it's one of those things I've never looked up, because I don't intend to sell any of them. But I found, let's see, I don't know if it's valuable, but not long after he died, I found that I've apparently owned an autographed Harlan Ellison paperback for decades. He's one of my favorite writers. I met him in person one time when I was younger. Just a weird thing. I was going through it, cataloging it basically, because I have a very large collection. In fact, I got to keep a spreadsheet on my phone of the books I own so I don't accidentally buy duplicates.
Buy more. That's a good idea.
But I had owned the book for years and had no idea it had been autographed. And in between the time that I bought it and the time I discovered the autograph, he had passed away. So it was one of those things where, like, I'm never going to get one. Surprise, you owned one the whole time. And then there's a comic book I really like called Gru the Wanderer. It's by this cartoonist, Sergio Aragones. And he signed an issue in a weird way where it's like hidden in the grass. So if you don't know what his signature looks like, it just looks like it's scribbled in there and you can't see it. So I bought that one for like just the regular price of the comic book rather than being autographed, because whoever put it in there didn't know it had been autographed. So I bought a little frame for that one to hang in my home office area.
So yeah, that's the question I have now. So you're collecting all this stuff. Where do you put it? Where does it go? Does your wife love this?
It used to stay in my office, but due to COVID, I closed up having a separate office from the house, because we had kids that did virtual learning, and I ran that whole show. So basically, why keep an office that I have to drive to if like 4 or 5 days out of the week I'm home until lunchtime every day? So all that to say, some of it went into storage, but paperbacks I don't trust in a storage unit. So those now line the walls of our basement, which are basically like library compact shelving. Because in my office, I had room to display them like normally. And here in the basement, they're like double shelved, like storage style, which I used to work in a library. So like I know how to do it, to pack them in tight, but still make them accessible. But yeah, it's one of those things where my old office, people would walk in thinking it was a bookstore just by looking through the window, and I'm like, no, these are mine. You can look and ask me about them, but you cannot buy them from me.
Have you ever like considered appraising them just out of curiosity, just to find out what the price tag on them would be?
No, what I will
For
tell
your
you,
children, maybe in the
well,
future, right?
what I will tell you is kind of what was in my head when I was collecting all this stuff is one of my favorite artists who I found 2 autographed paperbacks by her in my collection that I didn't know I had is Andre Norton. She was a librarian before she was a writer. And what she did at the time, like she was big in the science fiction fandom before she became a professional writer. And in fact, she didn't quit her library job until she published like her 24th successful science fiction novel. So she just didn't really see herself as like an author, but rather she was like deep in the fandom, and her collection of all the stuff she had from the time she was a little girl until she retired from being a writer, she made into not really a library or a museum, but like if you are a science fiction writer and you wanted to come and study the greats, that's what she had set up. So like she had guest bedrooms, and you could come and hang out and read like old pulp magazines that were no longer available in print, and just her personal collection. And because she was so influential, people would like mail her the first edition of their book. You know, I read you growing up, now I'm an author, here's, you know, an autographed copy of my first book. So she had all of this tremendous stuff, and like she died without plans for it, and no one knows what happened to that stuff. Like some people are like, I got this part of it, I don't know who got the rest. And it just, there was no place for it anymore. So kind of the idea of turning my office into a circa 1988 science fiction section and Walden Books in the mall, that was kind of my idea. Is like, I'm just going to get the stuff that people say was important, that was good, that isn't currently being published anywhere. There is no digital version. So I have tons of books that like, I may have one of the dozen copies of this paperback that survives from like 1985. So that was kind of my thought process and amassing this collection. And now I'm cataloging it. If it gets appraised and passed on to my sons, that would be what comes after I finish writing down the list of what I actually have.
Interesting. You're muted, Alice. Alice, you're muted.
I muted myself because I heard one of my sons get up, and I thought he might yell down the stairs to me. But so I was asking, like, you mentioned like when your sons and are they interested in that kind of stuff? And also I wanted to know if maybe they're also interested in following your footsteps and being kind of an independent.
Yeah, so
Not entrepreneur.
I've successfully indoctrinated them into like being a nerd. So they like the same kind of video games I like. They like the same kind of comic books I like. My oldest son, with the timing in school in the morning, his 2 younger brothers go to the elementary school, and he's got like an hour and a half until his bus gets there. So he's been watching like the 1997 X-Men cartoon. Like every morning he can put in like 3 episodes. So I've been rewatching it. So that's been fun sharing that with him. Because apparently like comic books change, like they reboot them and change up the stories. So he's like seeing variations of things where it's not that way anymore. I'm like, buddy, you don't even know. It's like soap operas, the way they change things around. Nobody dies for good, all of that kind of thing. But yeah, and then my middle son is the one who loves to read like books with words on it. My oldest kid only likes comic books. But this kid reads, like, we'll go to the library and he'll get like 20 books or whatever, and he'll read like 4 of them on the way home from the library. So he definitely picked up that bug. The youngest is too young to tell. I don't think any of them want to be writers necessarily, but I have gotten the question where it's like, Dad, what do you do? What is your job? Because they ask us at school. And then, of course, there are people like in my neighborhood that are my age that are on social media, and I don't have like a secret account for my work. So I get the same thing when we go to like, you know, the neighborhood pool or like the barbecue or whatever. And they're like, what? So you run a cult? Like not a real cult, right? You know, that kind of thing. So they're interested, but I don't think any of them necessarily has the bug. though they do like the stuff I liked as a kid that led me down this path. So like magic tricks or jokes, or even like jokes are pretty much the same as advertising. You like delight and surprise and leave someone in a good mood. I think a lot of comedians would do really well if they put a pitch at the end of their routine, go to this, scan this QR code with your phone from the crowd and download the recording of this performance kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I digressed a little there. I don't think they got the bug of being a writer just yet, but I don't think they're in their like school career where you get a whole lot of experience doing that and seeing if you like it or not. I always liked it in school, and in college I used to sell term papers to people because I mentioned I worked in the library. It's funny because I never thought of myself as a marketer, but I worked in the library when I was in art school, and people would come to the desk and like you could tell they were flustered and frustrated trying to look shit up because they had to write a paper that was due like the next day. So I would say, I can do that for you, and I guarantee at least a C. So if you think you're going to fail, a C is good, and I'm not going to offer an A because I don't know if you make A's, and that would look weird if you made one all of a sudden. I'll write you a C paper, and you can just walk out of here after you leave me a check, and we'll get it taken care of. I'll even turn it in for you if you pay extra. So I did okay with that for a while.
So now they can just get AI to do it for them.
Yeah, I've heard that's a huge problem, and that's another thing is like that's not like we've gotten to a point where like higher education, the point of it is that you go to get a diploma because supposedly you can earn a higher earning job. So there's financial incentive to cheat to get the diploma because you're not actually there because you care about what you're learning about, which is how it used to be formerly. You wouldn't bother going to university unless you were trying to advance that field of study. That's literally what like a PhD is meant to be for, is like, I'm not only going to learn all of it there is, I'm going to go invent some new stuff that no one's learned about this yet. But all that to say, there's that incentive to cheat using AI because you're not there to learn. You know what I mean? Like it's the shortcut to getting what you actually want out of the whole deal. And schools are not prepared to figure out how to catch that yet. Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine it getting worse when they let the AI eat things that the AI has already written for other people and use that as a source. So it becomes like mutated DNA with the errors replicating because no one's there to correct it. It just keeps, I'm going to keep perpetrating this incorrect information over and over again. And if you use the internet at all to look up whether something's true, things that are not true can very frequently now become like true out of gravity. Well, the first 3,000 results about this agree that this is the case. It must be true, but now not necessarily, because before the presumption was 3,000 human beings got this wrong. That seems unlikely, but now that's not what that actually demonstrates. Right. I digressed again. I'm sorry.
No, that's very interesting. And
this was actually very interesting. Yeah. So you're very pro like regulating AI in the future, I would say, right?
I think they should delete it. I think. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. Like I say, I'm an easygoing person, but I'm a full-on zealot about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's no beneficial use case scenario that I've seen that isn't based on taking something from someone else. So like, yes, it can write all this stuff for your business, but it's doing it by eating things other humans were paid to write and stealing it from them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's what people do when they create art. No, it's not, because they're people and this is a computer program. I could go on and on, but it's one of those things where it not only does it not have a good use case, but technologically, unless there's an advancement in energy, it's not worth the cost to get this thing to try and make like 50 pictures of your dog in a Halloween costume or whatever you're trying to get it to do and burn all this power and water to do that rather than just pay an artist to draw it for you the first time. So the efficiency of it, people think that they're just hitting a button on their computer, because the cost of it, the true cost of it, is getting covered by seed money from investors right now, because they're hoping it's going to turn into this big profitable thing, but it hasn't done that yet, and it might not. And once those investors quit paying for it, you're not going to be able to hit that button 12 times to say, show me Mickey Mouse eating an increasingly large number of hot dogs or whatever, which is something I've actually done.
Your collection.
Yes.
He actually did do that.
So it's one of those things that I think, like, literally, unless there's a breakthrough in energy costs, they're going to run out of money before investors are going to quit dumping money into it, because it won't turn into something that turns a profit fast enough. Because certainly the amount of subscriptions that people using it to cheat on essays and make weird pictures or whatever, there's no way that's covering the cost. That's why they needed billions from Microsoft. That's why the OpenAI guy he wants trillions of dollars in investing. That's why they need it. Like, the cost is huge, and right now it's hidden.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's going to flip in the next few years, is the cost they won't be able to hide the cost anymore.
Yeah, I think AI is one of the things that will actually widen the what do you call it, the gap, the economic gap between the rich and the poor, and not necessarily the ones that make the software, but it's actually the ones that make use of it, like lawyers, law firms, and accounting firms and stuff like that. Because I have people that are like paralegals and accountants that have been recently laid off because of AI, because it does the work that they normally used to do.
Yeah, and I think now
they don't do it anymore, right? So
there's going to be some backlash to that when it's realized that it can't be tweaked the way you want, and then there's that problem with it lying and not knowing it's lying, because it has it's not alive, it has no concept of what the truth even is. It knows words, it doesn't know if they're true or not.
True.
And then again, we have that thing where if the models continue to become distorted and they feed the snake its own tail and make it eat things that the AI produced that it got wrong, and then that gets put into its database, it's going to start replicating those errors. And the creators of the software have already said they don't know how to fix that part of it. Like, there's no way for them to make it tell the truth. So, and then because of the way it works, even if you only feed it true things, it will still eventually invent lies. And if you close that loop and feed its own work back to it, then those things start replicating. So there's that issue. So I think there's going to be a backlash in a lot of these companies that let people go prematurely and try to replace them with AI. But then on top of that, there's the issue that, like, I think eventually you're going to have, they call it, I forget what they call it. It's a term where the internet's going to get to the point where it's robots talking to robots, eating up all these endless cycles of power and computing. And the thing with computers, like they're like cars, they wear out. So like, you're blasting all this processing through this process, they're wearing it out, and then eventually you're going to need a new one. Or, like there's actual material wear and tear at the speed and frequency these things operate, and just the monumental cost of it is going to catch up to those businesses where, oh, we let all employees go because AI is free, or like $20 a month. Mm-hmm. And then when that VC money is no longer flowing in and they got to charge you what it actually costs to do that kind of processing, it's going to be way more than they were paying those employees. And I don't think companies realize that. It's going to change a lot, but the disaster is not going to come from those people losing their jobs. It's going to come from those businesses realizing, crap, we should never have fired all these people, because this is not what we were told it was by these biz bros selling it. It's not going to turn into what they're telling you it's going to turn into, like I said, unless somebody invents like a portal we can suck free energy out of somehow. I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, there's going to be like a reckoning, and it's not the reckoning people think is going to happen.
That's actually a very interesting perspective into this. I've never looked at it from a like a creator's perspective, like from an artist's perspective, and it's really actually useful to hear what creators have to say about it, because I believe what you're saying, like once the VC money dries up, there will be a different subscription cost, and I know it for sure, because right now it's so cheap to use it, but later on when the money doesn't flow in, somebody is going to have to subsidize that cost, and it's going to be ultimately the consumer, and it's going to eventually become maybe more expensive for.
And what's going to happen is basically the trick that it's good at doing now, pretending to be people based on these huge data sets. That's what makes it useful. But you go back to that thing of how it keeps lying. You've already had a case where a guy is suing a car dealership because he got the AI chatbot to sell him a car for $1 and make the deal in a way that if a person, like if a salesperson who worked at that company had made that deal, he sent him the paperwork. So like the deal is done, and they're like, it's a robot, and they're like, but you gave it this job. It put you in this legal predicament. So that has yet to weigh out. And then they had another one where it was an airline, and the person had to buy a flight. It was like a sudden death in the family, and it was something about their refund policy on bereavement rates. And the AI chatbot lied to the customer and saying, you know, don't worry, do it this way and you'll get refunded. But that's actually against the airline's policy. And the airline's trying to say, we're not responsible for that. And they're like, if it was a person who worked for you, you would be. Right. You don't get that loophole just because you put a computer program here. Like, what are you even doing? If this thing can't speak on behalf of the company, you can't give it this job
to do that
legally. You know, like that's the thing people aren't realizing is like people are going to jam this into places it has no business being, because they don't realize that it's just a glorified word processor. They're buying into the marketing hype of what these tools do, when really all it is, the simplest way to explain these tools, it looks at a word and it looks at its data set and it says, this is the word most likely to come next. It literally can't even read what it's writing. It doesn't understand what it's saying. It's just what word comes next based on math, and like that's all it does. But like, if anything, it reveals that human communication is not actually that complicated. It really is just stringing words together, and a computer can do it realistically, but it's not thinking. It doesn't have ideas. It doesn't create anything. It's just gluing things together, and currently, like we said, the things it's gluing together were stolen from other people, that if you had asked permission or compensated, again, that's a hidden cost. They stole all that stuff. If they would have had to pay for that, it would not have been viable. But instead, they stole it, and now they're like, look at this great thing we have. And people are like, billions, but it's stolen. So, I don't know. Like I said, I could go on about it forever.
Yeah, this is great though. Like, it's a very interesting conversation, and as you know, our audience is largely like creative entrepreneurs, some artists, and things like that too. And also before we wrap up, kind of bringing it back to lifestyle, which is also what we talk about a lot, is like, for you, like how do you live in this world where like AI is doing all these things? How are you going to continue?
I got you. In fact, this week starts the second cohort of a training that I put together specifically for people who want to kind of do what I do and not go the full automation AI way, right? Like people who, like for me, it matters that what I publish was written by me as a writer. I consider myself a writer as an artist. So like, I wouldn't ask an AI to write anything for me. You know what I mean? Like that's the part of my business I actually like doing. So looking at it from that point of view, if I can give like a philosophical element to it, knowledge on the internet information on the internet, largely cheap, free, abundant. You can't source it. That's only getting worse with AI tools. It's just noise, right? You can look something up and have no idea if it's true or not. So it's just words on a page in a book with no author's name on it. Like, what even is that? So becoming even worth less than free, if that's possible. You know what I mean? Going negative value. And this is actually a huge problem. Like, search engines existed to sort garbage information from good information when there were only humans making it at a normal, non-insane rate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's information. The next level of value above information is knowledge. And what knowledge is a combination of information plus an individual's experience. So someone took that information, used it, tested it, refined it, added more stuff that works, threw out the stuff that didn't work, maybe combined multiple sources of that particular piece of information and made something new. But the point is the hands-on experience. They used it. Now it's not info, it's knowledge. They know it because they put their hands on it. People will pay for knowledge. If you can show someone that this is not just info, this is knowledge, it comes from someone's experience, that is what is valuable now and only becoming more valuable. And the thing that makes it valuable is it has to pass through human experience. A computer program cannot vet information and turn it into knowledge. Only a human can do that. The next step beyond knowledge is wisdom. And wisdom is knowledge that has been passed from one person to another, and they can get the benefit from it without having had that same experience. So if I take a piece of information, I test it, I learn something about it, and I teach it to Alice, Alice is able to do what I'm able to do and did not have to do that learning process. That's wisdom, and it's so valuable we pass it on generationally, like to future human existence, because it's so useful and it works. No matter who does it, that's what wisdom is, right? So if you want to be a guru figure, you need to show that you are a repository and a creator of new knowledge through your work that you do every day. And what you sell is wisdom that has worked for you and your clients and your customers who have bought it before. So they know, I can buy this and it'll transfer to me. I don't need to be that guy. If you can do that, you'll always be able to compete with like AI generated garbage, because what you're selling requires you as a human to have made that into knowledge and processed it into wisdom. So if you do that as your work and sell the products of that, that's the way to compete. Not on scale, but you can make a living at it, because people who want knowledge can't get it from a computer program. So as long as there are people who value that human element, the people who make it clear that that's woven into your work will always be able to make a living.
Right. So before letting a bright mind like yours leave this conversation, I would like to ask you, are there any books that you've read? Maybe name one or two that really inspired you.
Like inspired
and change the way you're thinking. It doesn't have to be business related. Anything, because
okay.
It seems like you've got a lot of knowledge. It seems like you've read a lot. So just out of curiosity, I'm looking for books to read myself as well. So
okay, so yeah, there's the one that I recommend to a lot of people, and it's the book where, like, if I was going to write a book, I would write my version of this book, because it's been useful to me, but it did require adaptation. It's an ebook that was the workbook for a course that this guy Blair Warren sold. And at least the last time I checked, you can buy the PDF of the book from his website. It's called The Forbidden Keys to Persuasion. And Blair was a TV producer, if I remember correctly. So he presented the material about mass persuasion and influence from his point of view as like a guy who made news reels for broadcast TV. And one of the main things I liked about the book is that it's a scholarly work, so it has a bibliography. He cites different works. He quotes different authors that he's like, I'm borrowing this guy's idea to teach this thing. And that was a book, that was like the first book I read when I got hired, quote unquote, as a copywriter. Like I got promoted into that job. And I think if I'd read any other book, I wouldn't look at it the way that I do about influence being higher than persuasion. Influence is who the messenger is from. Persuasion is what the message is. So to make this useful to your audience, it's hard to persuade strangers to do what you want if they don't know who you are. But it's easy to persuade strangers to know who you are, and then you're influential, and then your persuasion is a lot easier because it matters who it's coming from. But this is the book that I picked that up from, Forbidden Keys to Persuasion, and it's by Blair Warren, spelled the normal way you would spell either of those names. I think he's got a website under his name, but like I said, he was briefly in the internet marketing world making info products, and then I guess he changed his mind. And I had to bug him for years to make that book available for sale because I would tell people about it, and they'd be like, I can't find it anywhere. And then I'd go to his website and it wouldn't be there. So I'd email him and say, like, I'm not saying I'm going to make you rich, but I tell people about this book monthly, and you would at least sell a few copies if you let people buy it. So he eventually did, and I think you can get it from his website. So that's the first one. Let's see, a second one that's been influential. There's a children's book called The Children's Almanac of Words at Play, and it's by Willard R. Espy. And I don't know if it's still in print, but someone gave that book to me as a gift when I was a child. And I remember that book as the one that made me love language as a game. So it's got it teaches you what alliteration is. It teaches you different rhyme schemes. It talks about spoonerisms and palindromes and all these tricksy things with words that just gave me a love of playing with words. Because I don't like to write the way, I guess when novelists describe how they sit down to write. That seems so boring to me. That's not what I'm doing when I do it. But that book is what I remember being a kid and being like, this is fun to do, to play with words and twist them around and trick people with them, kind of. So that's a good one if you can find it. And then, let's see, the rule of three. I got to give you a third one. It can't just be two. Okay. Let's say... So there's this book called Understanding Comics, and it's by Scott McCloud, and he is himself a comic book writer and artist. And what he meant it to be is a book about how the medium of comics works, being a hybrid of image and word that creates something that, it's a sum that's greater than a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. So he has lessons on things like if you see a person who is scared, and then you see a word that says bang, and then you see a nighttime sky with birds flying off. You would see those three images, and you might make a whole story up in your head like a person got shot. That's not in the picture. You made that part up in the gaps in between those pictures. So in that way, he teaches about how comics is a medium that requires the audience to invent parts of it using themselves, which, as you might guess, years later, being a persuasive writer, that concept is useful. Because if I get you to put yourself into the work, I'm not telling you something from outside. It's a voice from inside you telling you what you should do. So that was a book that was highly influential to me, and it is a comic book itself. It's a graphic novel about the medium of comic books. And that's one where not only do I recommend it to people, that's one where if I see it in a used bookstore, I'll buy it and give it to someone because I know I'm going to recommend it. And I'll say, look, I have a spare copy that you can have. But those three, Forbidden Keys to Persuasion, Understanding Comics, and what was the third one? I forgot already. I read
book.
The kids' book, yes. Willard R. Espy's Children's Almanac of Words at Play. I can see the cover in my mind. It's yellow. There's a white oval in the center, and the lettering on the book is Pink and Blue, if I'm remembering it correctly. But anyway, hugely influential book. Give it to a kid that you want to turn out weird.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing those, and your thinking about books that do make a difference. Like you talk about comic books. I remember I had this big photo. It was like a phone book, thick book, and that was really like something you just go to over and over again. And I think that's lost.
Yeah,
maybe
I
in
think
today's digital age, that kids are like, we used to read the same thing over and over and get so much out of it, right?
yeah, and one thing I can leave you with, especially tying into this whole idea of like a lifestyle style business, and we kind of talked about doing content about here's what I'm doing in my work every day and talking to colleagues. That's something I made the connection to comic books early in my career because like consider Batman. No one knows he's Bruce Wayne, right? Like maybe his butler, maybe Robin. The commissioner doesn't know, the criminals don't know. That's a secret. But you, the reader, you know. You're in the inner circle. As a 12-year-old kid, you know all of Batman's secrets. You get to see behind the scenes. You get to see over his shoulder. You get to see when his confidence wavers because you can read his thoughts literally. And that concept of being a person in business who lets the audience in to that degree is one of the ways to become hugely influential. And these comic book characters are like generationally influential at this point. So that perspective of putting your audience as the kid reading the comic book was a big twist for me, where that's what you're doing. They are in on the secret identity. They know who you are underneath the mask. You wear the mask and you go do the work for your clients, but then you come back, you take it off, you hang the costume up, and you talk to the kid who's reading your comic book about what you did that day.
Love that. So, but now you told us about everybody else's books and stuff before we wrap
Oh,
up.
right.
Where do they find you, Colin? Because I'm sure
So
would like to know.
I have new posts every day on cultofcopy.com. From there, you can subscribe to my list, which is the same content, but like with an extra useful part attached. So maybe like if you think of the post on the blog as like the mindset part, if you subscribe to the email, you also get the tactical part of here's what to do today to apply this. That also will tell you how you can access my training vault or hire me for consults. I mentioned I'm doing a current training intensive. So if you reach me on Facebook or email me at reverend@cultofcopy.com and ask about that, that is a 4-week intensive called Iconoclast Ideologue Influencer Intensive. So the triple I. But a lot of the stuff we talked about today is in the front of my mind because that course is basically like a brain dump of everything I've done since I quit writing copy for people and made myself into someone people want to hire for advice or learn from how to do marketing things. So how to make yourself into somebody. I'm doing the second cohort. I'll do a third one, but it's not like there's no group element. So if you reach out and you want to join in and we're a few days into it, you won't miss anything. So just reach out to me if you want that. I'm always doing new things. That happens to be the thing I'm doing right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colin.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. Honestly, it feels like we can't carry it out for as long as we want. We'll save it to some, maybe next time.
Yeah, well, I'll say if you like the kind of things I have to say, I say a lot of things all day long on the internet, and they're not hard to find.
I told him that you guys need to follow you on Facebook at the very least, because just even your Facebook posts, I'm like, damn, I'm always sharing them in our group too. I'm like, I don't share people's content, but I'm sharing yours all the time.
You might be the one, because there's someone who shares my stuff who's like they're sharing it in a place I'm not a member of. So I'll see that it was shared, but it won't tell me where. And I'm like, do they hate it? Do they like it? Well, thanks very much, guys. It was great to meet you, Yusuf, and so good to speak to you again, Alice. I hope your audience finds me tolerable, maybe even a little entertaining. And if you want to know more, I'm not hard to find. I would love to speak to you if you enjoyed anything I have to say.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Colin.
right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Hey, it's Alice again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, we just wanted to invite you to join us as an eKit Hub Insiders member on YouTube. As a listener of our podcast, you probably have already subscribed to the channel, but there is an opportunity to join the membership, which gives you extra member perks. And if you're a regular listener of the podcast, or you think you might be, there's an extra special perk in there for you as well. So when you go under any of our videos, you'll see the link to join, and that will give you the opportunity to join the eKit Hub Insiders Club. It will show in your local currency, but it's an affordable way to support the channel so we can bring more guests and also do all the marketing tutorials and things that we do for you as well on this channel. But when you join, you will get eKit Hub Shop eKits credits, $7 gift code for grabbing some templates to help your business, done for you content, printables, and all that great stuff that you know we have at Shop eKits. You also get 10% off our new eKit Hub group training programs. There is also a monthly members only live stream, which is a class on various topics. We've done a lot of marketing skills, we've done mindset stuff, and we have tons planned, and we do that each and every month with our members. And the other great thing is, as you know, we are creating this my lifestyle self-made workbook for you guys, and it's sort of a living document, and each time we get together, if you join us live, we're giving another piece of that workbook. But if you are a member of the Insiders Club and you can't make it for any episode, you will have those download links put inside of the members area in the community tab, so you'll be able to download whenever you'd like. And everybody else has to attend all the ones live. We still, of course, hope you will join us live, because that's a lot more fun that we can chat and do things together. But anyways, if you are interested, just click join under any of our videos and you'll be able to get into the eKit Hub Insiders Club.
And
What brought you to it?
Oh. Do you guys need to raise your hands? Which one? Who do I answer first?
Go with Alice's question.
No, Yusuf. I refuse.
No, go ahead. No,
it was not a question. It was more of a comment.
Yes.
So continue, Yusuf.
Interesting. You're muted, Alice. Alice, you're muted.
I muted myself because I heard one of my sons get up, and I thought he might yell down the stairs to me. But so I was asking, like,